evening. I want to thank UC Berkeley for hosting us and Anna for organizing this event. I'm going to start with our panelists. We have really great people here.
You need to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Mayan. I work at Lenovo. I'm the product manager for the AR commercial device and also the SDK. Lenovo we just released a new device called A6, and if you want to know more, I will talk about it later. But it's not about me. So I'm gonna start with Rina. Rina is the design lead for augmented reality at IBM. She won the Rising Star Award and the Eminence and Excellence Award, the UX Designer Designation Lab, and she studied at the University of Chicago and the University of Technology in Sydney. At IBM Silicon Valley Lab, Rina is creating experiences for IBM's next generation analytics products and developing new ways of interacting with data using augmented and virtual reality to help data scientists uncover insights faster. She has a passion for extended reality, artificial intelligence, and other emerging technologies, and enjoys planning for the design problems of tomorrow, as well as solving the design problems facing our customers today. As a former award-winning TV news reporter and online journalist, Rina has made a career out of answering the question, why? It's the same innate curiosity that drives her passion for good user experience. She notices things, she's bothered by things, she's compelled to make them better. Rina has a BA in journalism from the University of Technology in Sydney and an MA in international relations from the University of Chicago. Very impressive. So we're gonna start with your background, which is super interesting. It's interesting because you started from a completely different subject that you've learned. Like you were a journalist. So how did you go from being a journalist into being an AR designer?
It's definitely an unconventional background to say the least. I really loved what I did as a journalist, and I think you hit it on the nail when you said, that bit about curiosity. I think as much as I loved what I did as a journalist, though, it's a very difficult sort of job to sort of sustain for a long time because you do work a lot, right? And television doesn't stop just because it's like 10 p.m. at night or a weekend or Christmas Day. So I think at some point I realized, you sort of burn out a little bit and, you miss out on the rest of your life doing that. And so I actually switched from working in television to working online. And, I think that was where the transition really started because, initially I was, writing and doing content, but then, gradually I found myself doing, things like redesigning information architecture, navigation, A/B testing things. And I didn't really realize at first what I was doing. I was just doing it because it needed to be done. And, you're working on websites and that was just a part of it. And then it's sort of after a while it became clear to me, oh, actually this is design, this is, a thing. And so that was kind of how I made that transition into design. And I did start out doing more, traditional like mobile and web design, and then moved into AR as well when I came to IBM. Yeah.
And what kind of understandings do you think that you've taken from the journalism world into the design work that you're doing?
It's surprising, like a lot of things actually transfer over. Because I guess if you think about design more from the standpoint of it being something where it's like visual design or just wireframes, like it seems like a very stark comparison. But if you start thinking about design as problem solving, you realize like actually there's a lot of overlap in terms of what you do. And when you're a journalist, you spend like every day interviewing people and asking questions, and you're trying to do it from a place of being like empathetic but also objective. And a lot of what you're doing is sort of trying to like read between the lines to find that story, right? And I think when we do design, that's what we're doing as well, right? It's like problem solving to figure out what the user actually needs, and it's not always what they say they need when you ask a question. It's it's figuring out like what that core problem is that you're actually trying to solve. So there's a lot of overlap there. Certainly like the communication aspect of being a journalist helps, because you can do great design, but if you can't explain it to someone, if you can't defend it, your designs are kind of going to stagnate and maybe won't go very far. So that's obviously another piece that's really helpful. And then I think again, like the curiosity, like that's such a huge piece, right? Like if you're a designer, I think you have to be like questioning things all the time. Like, why is this the way it is? Why is this button here? Why are we, like, just because we've always done something a certain way, do we keep doing it? Or is there maybe a better way, right? So.
Yeah, actually, like now that you're talking about it, there's so many there's similarities about writing stories in Jira, and going through that user journey and being able to verbalize that. Like it makes a lot of sense in that way. And what are you working on right now?
Yeah, so at IBM, the product that I'm working on, we are helping users, so data scientists, business analysts, very sort of technical users, explore AI models using augmented and virtual reality. So it's really like data visualization to help you understand algorithms. Because I guess if you think about AI, it's everywhere, right? Like it's in so many things that we do, and maybe we just don't even realize it a lot of times, but it really can affect your life, right? It's, like when you apply for a credit card or a bank loan, I mean, there's AI that's helping, make predictions about whether you're going to pay that off, right? That's going to help decide, I'm not saying it's making the decision, like there's probably a person also that's a part of that, but it's contributing, right? So it's important. And yet, like AI can be so complex that we often don't understand the algorithms. We think of it as like a black box. Right? So we put something in and then something comes out the other end, and we don't really understand what's happening in the middle a lot of the time. And there are techniques that you can try to do on a computer to try to like dig into a model, but it's really complex. And with AR and VR, we're sort of able to create these new kinds of data visualizations that let you explore your AI model in a more immersive way. And sort of by seeing things spatially, you can sort of come to a better understanding of what's actually going on.
I think from my experience, different companies go at AR from like different angles. A lot of companies and people are very interested to find out what can be done with augmented reality, and some others face some questions, some problems that they have, and try to figure out if augmented reality is the way to solve that problem. So in the work that you're doing, do you feel like it's more in the exploration stage of like what can be done with augmented reality, or does it come from the other side of first there was the problem of not being able to visualize, and then we went to augmented reality to try and solve it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So I think it started out very much as an exploration for a long time of just how can we create data visualizations that are a little bit more intuitive. Like we didn't start out with this problem of AI models, definitely. It just started out with how can you analyze data, take a data set, look at it in this kind of different way. And I think for a long time we sort of went down that path. And then you get to this place of, you raised a good point of like, does the AR, does it need to be done in AR, right? And I think and I'm sure this is going to come up with one and probably time and time again, driving adoption is like a big challenge with any kind of emerging technology. And I think, you have to be creating something of value. So once we kind of had that exploration piece of we're figuring out how to do data visualization in this space, then it became, okay, well, what's the problem that needs to be solved that we can really add some value? And I mean, my business unit focuses a lot on data and AI, and a lot of the products that the company offers is related to AI and creating models. And so we thought, well, how can we support that using this tool? So, so definitely the exploration came first, and I think now we're on that path towards really like narrowing in on something that's going to offer value to people.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We're going to continue with Juan, and then we're going to go back to more work stuff.
Okay.
Forgive me if I'm looking at my phone. I'm just reading the bio, so it's not that I'm reading text or something. Okay, so Juan David Capiramos is a UX engineer at Google, a former UX lead commercial AI at Lenovo, a PhD from University of Copenhagen. Juan David is an HCI researcher and practitioner focused on making augmented reality devices and applications that solve actual problems for everyday people. At Google Maps, Juan is working on bringing the first generation of AR cloud-based functionalities and features for the Google ecosystem, such as Google Maps AR walking navigation. At Lenovo, Juan conducted foundational research for AR devices, applications, and use cases, and was an early member of the commercial AR team, which released the Think Reality A6 headset. And as you can understand, we worked together in the past, but now it's about you. So, Juan, tell us a little bit more about your journey in AR, HCI, PhD, Lenovo, Google.
Wow, that's a long story. So I did my PhD in human-computer interaction, and I did it in Europe. And if you are a little bit familiar with the type of research that happens in Europe, it was a very theoretical PhD. I wrote a very long thesis about philosophy of interaction, and I think the word that I wrote the most was Heidegger said this and Heidegger said that. And by the time I was done with my thesis, I didn't want to see one more book about philosophy. I was done. And like I need to do something very practical, and then that's when I went for a postdoc, and in my postdoc I started looking into AR, but it was more of I was a little bit in a period of discovering myself, what I was really interested in. I thought I was interested in philosophy. I was not. So I was kind of like testing the waters on different things, and I remember I was sharing the office with one guy who was doing computer vision, and he, at some point, he hit a roadblock in his research, and we did a little bit of a brainstorm together, and I said like, oh, well, he was doing analysis of security cameras, video security cameras, and I said to him like, this would be really nice to see on an AR headset, like, you know, like you are in the place where the video was taken, and you kind of like play that thing back in place, and I got very excited with that idea, but he kind of like said like, nah, that's I don't like that. And okay, well, whatever. And after a couple of months, it stuck with me, and I said like, what would it really take to do this thing? And that's how I started to go into AR. I never built that system, but I started to work into different types of AR devices. I started to look into tracking. I started to look into transparent displays. I started to look into what does it really take to make a headset, and why would we have headsets. So that's how I got into AR, and then eventually I left academia and I joined Lenovo. And the question I gave myself was, by this point I was completely sold out. Like, oh, AR is cool. We need this. But the question that many people have been asking for many years is who are we going to use these headsets for? What is this? And yes, we have HoloLens, and we have many headsets that have been built as a as a show of muscle and of might, but the use cases have not been solid, right? We don't see any large adoption of these headsets. So that's what I was trying to figure out at Lenovo. We did some very interesting projects, and I think a big conclusion there is that the place right now for where the technology is, what can be done, is on the enterprise when it comes to headsets, and that's why Lenovo is going in that direction, and I do believe that's the right direction for headsets right now. And then I'm more interested into consumer market, mass market things, and then that's when I said, there was a fork in the road for me, and I realized that I had to go, and then I went to Google to work on this thing, which is basically, how can we make these massive Google apps be somewhat AR enabled? So how do we, instead of creating new apps out of the blue and sort of starting from scratch, let's bring pieces of AR into these current apps that can make these apps better than what they are today, and leverage the unique potentials and capabilities of AR that actually make sense. So that's kind of my journey up to now. Yeah.
So your PhD was in human-computer interface. How are the questions that you were asking yourself when you were in the academia different than what you know now about AI?
Well, the goal was different, right? So, and the way to measure it is different. So when I was in academia, and especially the type of research that I did, we were trying to understand well, I don't want to talk about my PhD thesis, but the gist of it is, how do you design technologies that are easy to sort of that motivate people to change behavior, and that people willingly adopt them to help them change behavior. And it comes down, my work came down to understanding human motivation, to understanding what makes people do certain things, and there are, we realize that there are internal motivations and there are external motivations related to society and your place in it. And then there are ways to design technologies that sort of like cater to all those different motivations, right? So it was, in a way, very related to psychology, and how that psychology on these models of human behavior get translated into technology design. Very nice. The questions that we are asking right now are different in the sense, which is, we have this vision of augmented reality, of a world that is where everything has a digital twin, and there is intelligent information associated with that thing, with that twin. The question we are asking right now is, what are the steps we have to take, the progressive steps that are going to take us successfully to that vision? So it's a little bit more pragmatical. It's a little bit more grounded in reality, right? There are many things that limit what we can do, whereas when I was in academia, I could do whatever, right? I had to build prototypes, and they worked, and kind of, and run experiments, and that's it. Here is different. Here is, we have to cut down on this aspirational thing, and pace it in a way that both our users and the organization is able to absorb it, right? So
I think in a way, what you have researched in the past has a lot to do with it, with what you're doing right now, because if we're talking about workflows, or what is the path for adoption,
yeah.
or how do people move from using these things to having things on top of their heads, then I think that it's very interesting from that standpoint.
Yeah. I used to say, we had a conversation this week where, people still say like, oh, like, no one is gonna wear glasses, that's ridiculous. And no, like, whether you wear or not glasses depend on the perceived value that those glasses bring to you. So if you're wearing glasses and I know that those glasses add nothing to your life, I'll say that's ridiculous. But if I know that the experience that you're having in the world because of the glasses you are wearing is a superior experience, then it's not ridiculous anymore, right? And we had a similar situation when cell phones just came out. People would say like, oh, who wants to go around with a phone? That's ridiculous. But now it's like, oh my God, I can't leave my house without my phone. So it's a perception of value there. And yeah, that's what we need to figure out today. So what are those value adding features that will actually make people, okay, sorry. That will make people use and adopt augmented reality.
And you talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but you have worked on commercial AR devices before, and now you're working on consumer AR products. Where do you see the differences and similarities?
Well, the biggest difference is that in the enterprise, there is a very tangible motivation to do it. So when I was in Lenovo and we started to talk to clients, it's very easy to go from the initial investment to how many hours you can save by using augmented reality, or how much better the quality of life of your workers is going to be if they use this headset, or how much longer they can stay in the workforce if they adopt some of these augmented reality tools. So there is a very clear path into transferring what you do with your AR headset into money. And companies understand money, so as long as you're able to articulate your investment in those terms, it's very straightforward. In the consumer market, it's different because, especially at Google, people don't really pay to use our apps. We don't pay people to use our app, so we have to really add value. So the way that we measure this is, for example, in the case of Google Maps, so we have every month we receive this list of complaints, and it's like thousands, hundreds of thousands, and they are ranked, and we know that there are these things that people are complaining about in using Google Maps. So that is a way in which we can make tangible decisions about AR. So after we introduced some AR feature, are people complaining more or less? So if they are complaining less, hopefully, well, it means that we are adding value, right? And we are helping people perform the tasks.
Yes, actually that's a good segue to ask you as well. So you're working on an enterprise product. What type of problems do you see with enterprise? Like what type of problems you're trying to solve for the enterprise user that might be different from a consumer?
What kind of problems? How do you mean exactly? Like in terms of, I mean, I guess we're solving a very specific problem for a very specific user. Do you mean in terms of adoption, or in terms of like the issues? I know one was sort of talking about.
Yeah, the issues.
I mean, I feel like the big challenge with AR, and I mean, I think it's really the same for both consumer and enterprise. It's really, I guess it's twofold. Like one's kind of external, and I think one's kind of internal across companies. And I guess the external one is like the adoption, right? Like there's, I mean, you have to admit there's friction when it comes to adopting any kind of AR or VR technology, because, I mean, for one, you have to invest in some sort of hardware. And I mean, if you're talking about a headset, you're talking about like $5,000, $3,000. I mean, things are getting cheaper, but it depends on what you're trying to do. It could be quite expensive. And so, I mean, there's like that piece, right? And there's also the friction of like, your user probably has other tools to do whatever it is that you're trying to help them do. So they have to be willing to try yours instead, and it comes with this huge financial outlay. So at the end of the day, you have to be adding enough value that they're willing to pick your tool up and to pay quite a bit of money for it as a result. But then I think internally, companies always have this challenge of like competing priorities. You know, on the one hand, you have these innovations, right? Like these emerging technologies, and you want to be able to like focus on developing those. And then on the other hand, you have revenue generation, because I mean, companies have targets to hit, and you know, some of these technologies may not sort of reach maturity for a while. And you know, on the other hand, you've got customers right now saying, hey, we need you to fix X, Y, and Z on this product that I've already bought and I'm already using. So, you know, where's the sort of resources and the bandwidth going to go, right? So there's always this challenge of, do you focus on solving those problems that the customers are like, you know, demanding for today, or do you also spend time investing in those things that they're going to be asking for, you know, down the line, right? And you kind of need to do both, but it's like a juggle, right? So I feel like that's just this constant challenge.
I think let's go back a little bit, and I think that it will be important for the audience as well to understand what devices you're using when you're designing, what devices you're using for designing for Google Maps, and the different types of challenges that each device brings with it.
Yeah, so our product actually started out with HoloLens. So we started out with headsets. And then that was a challenge, I guess, in several ways. You know, for one, there was just, I think the graphics at the time were like a little bit limiting for what we were trying to do with data visualization. And then again, there's the cost. It was a huge sort of thing. And then to expect your users to have to get that device to be able to use it was an obstacle. And so when ARKit came out, we actually switched to mobile AR, and we started designing for iPhones and iPads. And I think that really helped a lot in terms of getting a lot more people to start trying it and using it. It was so much more accessible. Everyone has it in their pockets. But then that posed its own challenges as well. You know, I think when you're designing across different platforms, like, you know, one issue is just like the inputs are so different, right? So when you're designing on a phone, on a screen, like you're interacting with AR objects that are in the real world, and you're doing it by touching a screen. So that's like one challenge. And then when you have the headsets, you're designing for gesture and sort of it's a completely different form of interaction. And so then you have to change so many different things. You know, obviously with the headset, every sort of interaction element was in the world, in the environment. And then with the app, we had to bring a lot of things back into this like 2D interface. And so users interact with these two different things very differently as well, right? So there's a lot of challenges with that, and now we're also, you know, tackling VR as well, and so then we have controllers. So there's just like this third sort of thing. And so I think, yeah, there's definitely this challenge in just how different the different platforms are. I feel like going forward, we're going to start to see more of a convergence where the hardware does become more streamlined. And, you know, I've definitely seen devices that kind of do both AR and VR in the same device. And I think things like that might sort of help from a design point of view to be able to create these experiences that are a little bit more streamlined. But yeah, right now it's challenging because if you want to support multiple platforms, which, you know, we do, then it's really hard.
Well, we don't have that problem. I think, and I'm really, really glad that the team decided to do just mobile. So let's focus on mobile. That is what people have right now. And the beautiful thing about that is that we really need to nail AR on the smartphone platform. If we are not able to build tools that run in the cell phone and that work really, really well, let's say, you know, a version of Google Maps that has AR features on the cell phone, we'll be wasting, or not wasting, but we'll be kind of like jumping a few steps ahead in trying to do something for headsets without really identifying where the value lies in this AR proposition, right? So right now we work on Android, which makes me very happy. and on iOS, of course, because Google Maps also runs on iOS. And that's really a simplification that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. I would like to challenge you
Oh, please.
on the fact. So I'm not saying that I'm disagreeing about nailing
I get the
mobile
posture.
about nailing mobile AR,
Yeah.
but right now I think that and we discussed it a little bit before. A lot of AR is heavily relying on cameras, while there are other sensors or other ways of getting information about the world, which is not necessarily using cameras.
Yes. I agree.
Okay. Yeah. So
No, what is the challenge? Whether we need to nail a smartphone AR? No, I think
yeah,
it
is it
relates
like
to,
is it before? Is it is it
well,
simultaneous?
I think in the consumer market it is
Mhm.
before, because we are at least 5 to 10 years away from having a consumer market head-mounted display. We could have something today, but it would be at least $2,000-3,000. So it's not in the price range of a consumer device. In the enterprise, it's different. Yes, I do think the enterprise does well in focusing on headsets right now. Companies, even though it's expensive, if you're showing up value, they are willing to pay the upfront price of getting these devices. But on the consumer market, definitely not. Then therefore, the focus should be on a smartphone AR. Because like everyone has a smartphone, right? So the barrier of entry is really low at this moment, and it's not always been like that. It's only like started last year. So that is an opportunity that we can leverage, and we can use that as a learning platform for whatever is coming later. One of the beautiful things here is that whatever we are doing for smartphone AR, like except the upper layer of the interface and the interaction, is completely reusable for what's coming out later, right? So even if we had the capacity to have a headset today, a consumer level headset today, there is really nothing that you could install there. So you have people like Unreal creating this device, which is really nice. But if you think about it, what could you possibly run on an Unreal platform? Not really much, right? So it's better to take a step back, build the capacity, build the features, identify the way where the value is, build your people. Like companies don't have people that know how to build AR. Like there is at least a generational change in starting to think about that, right? Like it took like a new generation of programmers to move into mobile, or before that, a new generation of programmers that developed the web, and a new generation of programmers that develop mobile. There will be a new generation of programmers to do AR and VR. And that is the learning that we have to do today on mobile. Yeah.
Talking about mobile, let's talk a little bit about the challenges. So I don't know if all of you have ever tried the Google Maps, the AR feature on the Google Maps.
Very